By early 2026, Tehran was the geographic center of a rapidly escalating standoff. Beneath the city, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei operated in an extreme defensive posture. His compound featured a bunker buried so deep that the elevator required 5 full minutes to reach the bottom. Tactical opportunities to reach him were almost non-existent. But intelligence agencies identified a rare flaw in that defense. The CIA tracked his movements over months, pinpointing a specific window when Khamenei would be above ground at his official residence for a scheduled meeting with senior officials. On February 28th, Israeli jets struck in broad daylight. They dropped 30 bombs on the site, alongside Blue Sparrow missiles, an advanced air-launched ballistic weapon designed for high-altitude targeting. Eliminating the head of a highly centralized state is a modern military milestone, but it tests a dangerous theory. The strike forces a question. Does decapitating a regime neutralize a threat, or does it ignite a powder keg? Immediately after the bombs fell, the Iranian state enforced a near-total communications blackout. Internet traffic across the country plummeted to just 1% of its normal capacity. Behind that blackout, the Iranian Foreign Ministry mounted an initial narrative defense. They firmly denied any successful assassination, issuing statements that the supreme leader was safe and commanding the field. Western leadership refused to let the denial stand. U.S. President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu preempted Tehran, publicly claiming that intelligence sources had already recovered and identified Khamenei's body in the rubble. The official pivot came on March 1st. Iranian state media completely reversed its denial, confirming Khamenei's death and declaring 40 days of national mourning. By assassinating a sovereign head of state, the U.S. and Israel closed off the remaining diplomatic off-ramps. The targeted killing committed the entire region to an unpredictable escalation. The domestic reaction fractured instantly. Members of the Iranian diaspora and anti-regime citizens took to the streets in celebration, attempting to declare the end of the Islamic Republic, only to be met with live fire from deployed security forces. Simultaneously, massive crowds of mourners flooded religious centers like the Imam Reza Shrine. The gathering proved the regime still retained a deeply entrenched ideological base, capable of rapid, widespread mobilization. Because Khamenei had no officially designated successor, a power vacuum formed immediately. The IRGC, Iran's elite military and political branch, exerted intense pressure to fill the void without delay. Defying Western expectations of a protracted civil war, the Assembly of Experts, the clerical body responsible for selecting the supreme leader, appointed Mojtaba Khamenei to succeed his father within a matter of days. The assassination successfully eliminated the leader, but it failed to dissolve the system. Instead, the strike forced the surviving regime to rapidly militarize and harden its remaining power structure. The retaliation breached Israel's borders almost instantly. Iran launched waves of drones and ballistic missiles directly at the Tel Aviv metropolitan area. Civilian life in Israel ground to a halt as populations were forced into underground shelters. The sustained impacts caused confirmed infrastructure damage and civilian casualties across the city. The expanding violence awakened dormant regional fronts. Kurdish militias began consulting with the U.S. to launch ground operations against Iranian security forces in the western provinces. The concept of a contained surgical strike proved to be a strategic illusion. The kinetic energy of the assassination instantly metastasized into a sprawling, multi-border conflict. This map shows the geographic scale of U.S. and Israeli airstrikes. The bombardment expanded far beyond Tehran, hitting targets across 30 provinces. Relentless bombing in urban centers triggered an internal refugee crisis, forcing 3.2 million Iranians to abandon cities and flee to rural areas. The strikes deliberately destroyed survival infrastructure. Munitions damaged 20 hospitals and crippled critical resources like the Kesh water desalination facility. The tactical campaign quickly devolved into a civilian bloodbath. In the city of Manab, a U.S. Tomahawk, a long-range, all-weather cruise missile, struck a girls' school, killing over 170 children. Compounding the tragedy, the regime continued to throttle internet access at 1%. Without connectivity, civilians could not receive early warning alerts about incoming strikes, maximizing the death toll. On the ground, the military campaigns systematically dismantled the core infrastructure of Iranian civilian life. The demographic tragedy compounded for those already trapped in the margins. Before the war began, Iran hosted 4.4 million Afghan refugees. Facing soaring inflation and destroyed infrastructure, over 110,000 Afghans were forced into an impossible choice: stay in an active war zone or flee back to Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. This map illustrates the final economic shockwave. The de facto closure of the Strait of Hormuz to commercial shipping severed global supply chains and sharply spiked global energy prices. Western tacticians initially heralded the assassination as an enormous military success, but that framing obscures the reality of a sprawling, uncontrollable regional fallout. In the modern geopolitical ecosystem, decapitating a centralized regime does not neatly erase a threat. Instead, it shatters the state apparatus, displaces millions, and disperses the catastrophic costs squarely onto the shoulders of civilians across the globe.